your portfolio of work?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So glad that you are with us today. I serve, as Katie mentioned, as the Vice President of Student Services and have a lot of things that are outside of the classroom experience for students. So university housing, fraternity and sorority life, student organizations, health and counseling, our new student programs, family programs, so many of the things that your students would have contact with, student advocacy and assistance. And so I hope to be a resource to you today to help answer some questions about our planning and our decision making for fall.
Great, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to cover in today's webinar. We are aware that the impacts of COVID-19 are evolving every day, and we are providing a series of webinars today and throughout the month of July to answer questions to the best of our ability about what the latest information is relative to our plans for fall. Today, we're only discussing topics related to campus life, as well as the health and safety measures that we are implementing here at ASU. A webinar about how students are attending classes and what the academic experience will look like will be held on Friday, July 10th. The first 20 to 30 minutes of our discussion today are going to be focused on some of the most commonly asked questions that we're hearing from students and families. And then we'll take live questions from Zoom webinar registrants during the remaining 30 minutes of our webinar. We do encourage you to ask questions after the first 15 to 20 minutes of our discussion today, in case your question is answered during that time. And for those of you who do have questions, you can type those questions into the Q&A function. We will not be answering questions via the chat function. We'll be having a live dialogue between Dr. Vogel and myself. Anyone who's watching the live stream on YouTube can send any unanswered questions to Dean of Students at asu.edu, and somebody will get back to you as quickly as possible. And then just a final note that today's webinar will be recorded and will be shared on asu.edu/fall 2020 in case there's anything you want to go back and revisit, or if you have friends and family who want to watch this after the fact. So let's go ahead and jump right in and tackle our first question. I read that visitors won't be allowed during move-in. How can I help my student move in? Joanne, you want to talk about what the move-in process will look like this year?
Sure. So what I think people may be picking up in this statement is that we have, similar to our spring semester, decided that there will not be guests inside of residence halls. As you can imagine, that is to help us promote the health and keep the environment as controlled as possible for the students who are living on campus. For our parent and family or spouses and friends who are planning to assist students in moving in, how can you help is stay tuned with us. We are, as Katie mentioned, keenly watching and aware of the local circumstances in Arizona. What we're asking at present is that anyone that is assisting a student in move-in must abide by the same requirements as we've asked the students. So face coverings in common areas. We have capped the amount of people on an elevator. We're encouraging people where possible to take the stairs. And to limit the amount of time that they're spending inside the residential hall, and to also stay within the move-in timeframe that we've allotted as best as possible so that we can monitor the flow and the traffic of people inside and outside the building. So in a good way, we are anticipating that people can help students move in. And that, of course, that decision will be made as close to the time of move-in as possible to be in adherence with the local and health guidelines at the time.
Great, thank you. Our next most frequently asked question is, what precautions are being made for on-campus housing? Tell us a little bit about the living environment and what that will look like this year.
Sure. So you heard a little bit in the last answer, things like face coverings in the common areas. We are limiting the use of some of the common spaces, so whether that's kitchens or the like, in some of our res halls. The other thing that we are doing involves our cleaning regimen. And then in a great way, ASU has the good fortune of having many of our housing configurations are suite style and have limited communal bathroom situations. And so that also helps us to be prepared. We are also offering to those where available and for those who request is the ability to secure a single room arrangement for a slightly increased charge. And so we're doing a lot of things to help de-densify is a word that we use sometimes, is to lower the amount of people in any particular area. And then to also have good health hygiene is another thing that we will be marketing throughout campus. And hoping that you will stay put in your room if you are not feeling well and reach out for health guidance at that time.
That's great. Thank you. Next question. A lot of students are asking about what on-campus dining will look like. So can you tell us what are students' dining options, and will their choices be limited to takeout food?
So we are doing a takeout only option at present. We hope that if things were to improve, that we would be able to open back up some spaces to eat in our various areas like the Union or some other places on campus. For now, everything is limited to takeout only, yet the range of options will be broad. And so one of the things as we go into the fall that you'll see with welcoming as many students back to campus as we will be doing is that we realize that we will need many food options. And so your dining options will be quite extensive, but all of those options will be takeout only and then involve like prepackaged disposable utensils, things that you can pick up and then not have to be sharing or touching other people's items or food utensils.
So there's not there. I know there's been a lot of confusion about this. These aren't, boxed lunches, with a sandwich and a piece of fruit and a bag of chips, although I assume that might be available for somebody who wants them, but there will be a really wide range of dining options. Can you give us some examples of some of the food choices that students will have?
And so some of our food choices that students typically really enjoy, like Qdoba and Chick-fil-A and the Starbucks, and the pod markets. So many of, if not all of the things that people are accustomed to will be available. We may have to, at some points in time, do some alternating days on some of those options, simply because our flow of traffic in and out of places like the Memorial Union or the really popular places for students to eat may require us to do a little bit of that adjustment to some of the schedules, including extending out the schedule for some of our dining options to control the traffic flow as well.
Great. And then you mentioned that choices will be limited to takeout food only. And part of that is obviously encouraging and working towards a de-densified option within, indoors in Memorial Union or other, places where students eat. But we are expanding outside dining seating areas, right? Can you talk a little bit about that? So this isn't, you have to grab your food and head back to your, residence hall. This is, we're just trying to keep folks outside. So talk a little bit about some of the outdoor dining seating areas that we'll have available.
For sure. We're absolutely hoping students will socialize and get to know each other. We also recognize that eating means taking off your face covering. And so at the same time, we also have heard from a lot of the research out there is that being outdoors, it actually minimizes or helps with the virus transmission issue. And so we are encouraging people to go outside. We also recognize that Arizona can be hot this time of year. So look for some shade. We're going to have some outdoor furniture. You will also, you'll see some coverings and some ways that we're going to try to keep it cooler outside. But we fully anticipate by the time September and October roll around, it will be a wonderful place to go outside, sitting 6 feet or more apart, and then eating your food together and socializing with friends.
Great. All right, let's move on to the next question. Will student clubs and organizations still meet, and how will they maintain safe physical distancing?
Yes, so our student clubs and organizations are continuing to meet. They did so through the spring. Many of them are meeting in the summer currently. They are making the decision many times to maintain in the virtual environment. Some of our students have realized that they actually have better attendance with the option to be either in person or virtual. What we hope to see is that as we move into the fall, and if health conditions improve, that we would be able to, again, with safe social distancing, limiting some of our capacity in some of our rooms. So our various people around campus have been going from room to room to room and telling us what the maximum occupancy should be based upon furniture configurations and how we can distance people safely apart. And so when student clubs and organizations, when the time is right to reassemble in person, we will be able to, as we always have done, is have them reserve some rooms or congregate in some of the places around campus with the same stipulations that we're currently talking about: face coverings, social distancing. And then the other thing we want them to do is remember who's at a meeting. I know we'll talk in a little while because conversation or questions have come up about what happens if there's a positive case on campus. We do want people to know who has been at meetings in the event that we need to do some type of contact tracing.
Well, that is a perfect segue into our next question, which is, what will happen if someone in my residence hall or class tests positive for COVID-19?
Sure. And so the first thing is we'll put our initial focus on the someone who tests positive. And so we have been through this many times in the spring semester where we've identified a student who has shared a positive test result with us. And then we wrap around the care that this person needs. So making sure that they stay in isolation, ensuring that they're getting dining and food delivered to them, and then also beginning the process of what we call a case interview and then contact tracing. And so in the event that if someone in residence hall or class has been in close contact with you or with a student or anyone in our community for the period of time that the county and the state have identified as being important in notifying someone about the risk of exposure, is then we begin along that process of notifying those individuals directly. If you are reading some of the things around various states, including Arizona, about maybe the difficulty in contact tracing, I wanted to take a moment to assure those listening that our healthcare professionals on campus have been working in support of and in close coordination with the county and the state. And we do a much more intensive contact tracing process because we find the environmental management of our own space to be so important. So rest assured, if there is a risk that we are aware of, that someone in either your residence hall or class has tested positive and you are at greater risk due to an exposure there, you will be contacted by a person who is going to then encourage you to seek care or to remain in quarantine, to monitor symptoms, and we'll walk someone through what that looks like. And then we'll make sure that in the same way I talked about wrapping around resources and needs for the person who tests positive, we will ensure that the person that needs to stay in quarantine while we're awaiting any test results, if they're being tested, that they have all the things they need to be cared for, fed, and have all the information they need to understand what's going on.
And then also continue their education, right? If somebody's in self-isolation because either they tested positive or, somebody's in self-isolation because they may have been exposed to somebody, we have our, academics set up so that students can continue to take classes through our ASU Sync option. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
For sure. And so, like you mentioned, for both those who've tested positive or students who may be in self-isolation and quarantine, what we have found is many of them have either no symptoms or mild symptoms. And so continuing on in their academic progress is able to be accomplished. And in that way, of course, we would not want them to go onto campus or into the classroom setting. So they can use ASU Sync, our mode of learning that allows them to interact in the way we are today, and to stay current with what's going on in class. However, if a student has moderate or severe or is even hospitalized due to COVID, we will work with them to figure out a plan to either finish if the student wishes to, take incompletes, or delay until such time that they're healthy enough to re-engage academically.
Okay. Our next question is about testing. How will COVID-19 testing work for students, and will testing be free?
Yeah, so currently we're asking all students to continue to connect with ASU Health Services if they have a need for testing. And we are doing that currently through our telemedicine platform. That allows us to, if someone is symptomatic, to control either their entry or exit into our clinic setting. So we are messaging quite broadly and asking you all today to help me with that, which is if you are seeking care, if you're symptomatic, please use our telemedicine platform for your consult and then to schedule when you're going to be seen for testing. And then to answer the second part of that question, will it be free? Yes, we do not want any of the costs to fall back to students for testing.
Great. Our next question is about health monitoring. I've heard about health monitoring. How will the health of students actually be monitored?
Yeah, so we're working with our university technology office. They are working through our ASU app. So students will be encouraged to, as soon as they can, if you haven't done it, do it now, is to go ahead and download the ASU app. Prior to arrival, we'll be sending out a few questions along the lines of, have you been tested for COVID-19 previously? Was it an antibody test or an active viral test? Of course, best you know, sometimes people aren't maybe up to speed on what the differences are, but if you know, we're hoping you'll share that with us. That will give us a little idea of how many people have already been exposed or have the antibodies for COVID-19. We may ask about travel in the event that, as we're seeing, there are different places depending upon where you're traveling to or from that have some quarantine guidelines and restrictions. And then, of course, some questions about the other piece being your current health status. So how are you feeling at this point in time? So that's a pre-arrival screening. And then once students are here, students, faculty, and staff will all be required to do a daily self-monitoring. So the way we are configuring it to work for the fall is that you will be sent a prompt or a reminder to answer a series of questions. They're the same types of questions that I answer every morning as I come into the building where I work. Do you feel ill? Have you noticed any new upper respiratory symptoms? Do you have a fever greater than 100.4? And have you been in contact with anyone who is positive for COVID or is awaiting the results from testing? And so you'll see some series of questions along those lines that you will be prompted to complete every day in order to sort of discipline ourselves to thinking about, do we need to stay inside? Do we need to seek health guidance? Am I healthy enough and feeling good enough to be out and in the community?
Our next question is back to testing. How will ASU support me if I test positive for COVID-19?
Yeah, so I jumped a little bit ahead on that one. So I'll reinforce a couple of the points I made before. And so if you do test positive, we have a group called our Student Advocacy and Assistance Engagers. And so we ask that students, if they've tested in the health center, is to give permission, if they're willing, for us to engage our engagers. And what they will do is they will talk to you about any academic needs you have. And so back to that point, if you're healthy enough to maintain in the classroom setting and you're testing positive, fantastic. We're glad that you'll continue. If you need some extra support or you need us to communicate with your faculty on your behalf, we can do that. The other thing we'll do is ensure that you have all the medical care set up and you have your questions answered. We will also we ask if we can do a daily check-in with you just to say, how are you feeling today? Are there any needs you currently have? We do food delivery. And so how did that go? Is it meeting your needs? Did it come on time? So our support is quite individualized. We have a large team prepared to be ready to provide that level of support. And we hope you'll take us up on it. Some students say, oh, I'm okay, don't call me for another week, but we'll call you back in that week. If you don't want daily contact, we understand and respect that, but we just want to check on you and make sure you're doing okay.
Let's talk about face coverings on campus. How does ASU plan on enforcing the face coverings requirement?
Sure. So I hope by now everyone realizes that we have committed to, as has the city and the county around us, mandated the required use of face coverings in public. And so that covers inside of our ASU buildings. For students who are living on campus, the exemption being your own personal room where you're living. And then outdoors as well, the expectation is that students will be wearing them on their way to classes and in the classroom as well. If a student has forgotten a face covering, we've asked faculty and others to come prepared with a disposable mask that they could give to the student. It is my hope that our students are, and I know that they are, responsible enough to remember to be wearing their face coverings at all times. And then if the student doesn't wish to put on a face covering in the classroom, the faculty member will ask them to leave the classroom. It is similar to if students showed up with open toe shoes in a laboratory setting. They wouldn't be allowed to engage in the laboratory setting on that day. The good news about ASU Sync is that if a student didn't want to, or we ran out of face coverings for some reason, which we're not hoping to ever do, but that if that were to be the case, the student could then use ASU Sync to come into the classroom, whether they're sitting outside or in the library. Bring your headphones. That way they wouldn't miss out on class. So they would simply have to leave the classroom. Of course, if they're not wearing a face covering, they can't be in the library either. But I think at this point, we would simply condition students to doing the right thing and protecting others. And then what we would do as a last resort is we do have a student code of conduct that with reasonable requests from university officials, which we feel this is quite a reasonable request when it is protecting the health of other members of the community, we could use the student code of conduct to require enforcement.
Okay. Well, that concludes the portion of our webinar that was really focused on the most frequently asked questions that we're hearing from students. And we are now ready to move into the Q&A from our Zoom participants. Our first question is there a threshold for ASU to not open in person in August?
Yeah, another fantastic question. And I think what is occurring for us now is we are really watching our local health circumstance. And so please know that it is going by none of us on this Zoom that Arizona is struggling with an increase in cases. And so the threshold issue, we haven't picked a threshold where we would need to move in a particular direction. I think what's more important to know is that if there did come a point, whatever that threshold might be, that we needed to move back into that ASU Sync, that virtual mode where we delivered classes previously, is we can do that very quickly. So it is our sincere hope that conditions here in Arizona will begin to improve before students would be starting class in the fall. If not, we will continue to monitor very closely. We know that we are in management mode of COVID. I think if we're watching and paying attention all across the nation, there are many places that are in this mode of how can we address quickly the needs for people to engage in what they're calling, non-pharmaceutical interventions, which are all the things we mentioned today: face covering, social distancing, hand washing, cough etiquette, anything that will help to curb the rate of growth. But I think my lots of answer to get to the short answer, which is don't know yet what a threshold would be, but we have capability to move into ASU Sync or delivering instruction in the way we did in the spring if we need to.
Okay. Will all students need a negative COVID test prior to moving into the residence hall?
No, so we are not requiring proof of a negative COVID test. I think there's several reasons for that, and some are scientific and medical, and what we're seeing coming out with people who are asymptomatic and may not be detected by COVID tests. It is one of the reasons we're asking about the antibodies, and I think the difficulty is we don't yet know if that's actually protective for future infection, but we are going to try to get a population screen with some of those questions I mentioned for the pre-arrival health screening. At the same time, I think we would love if people wish to be tested. There are lots of places doing that around the nation and different companies who are doing that. And so reach out if you, wherever you are locally, we would highly encourage that you think about getting a test in the 72 hours prior to when you move in.
Will students from other dorms be able to visit other students in their dorms?
No, so only the residents of that particular residence hall should be in that residence hall. So it is one of the ways we would control how many people are free flowing in and out. That one exception is the one I mentioned about move-in. But beyond that moment in time, we are asking that we sort of make a bubble in each of our residential halls to attempt to protect them as best as possible for people who are trying to limit the amount of contact that they're having with other individuals. So no guests from one residence hall to the other.
Can a student choose to live at home for the first semester and then move into the residence hall for the spring semester?
Yes, so providing we have availability, we do want students and their families to choose the place they feel most comfortable and confident taking courses. So nearly all of the classes will be offered in this either in-person and ASU sync mode, allowing students the ability to be at home if they wish and take their courses and stay on track without having to come into the classroom setting. I would encourage people to check their course schedule ahead of time because there is a very small proportion of classes that will be offered in person only. It's the type of classes you might anticipate, performance or otherwise. But if you check your classes and it is able, which it should be, and if not, someone can reach out to me directly or to, we have an academic webinar coming up on July 10th, I believe it is. Another great place to get some answers about how to take your courses in a different manner. But we would love to have you live with us in the spring, providing there's availability in housing.
Can students reserve rooms for the spring now? What does that process look like?
We would send me an email. Let me know you're interested. I will put you on that list.
Okay. Let's see. And another question about dining here. Will the takeout food also include the dining halls and cafeterias that are run by ASU, not just the fast food options?
Yes, it will. And so what might be embedded in that question, so I'll go ahead and answer it, is the all you can eat options. And so in that way, you can take the containers that you wish to take in that all you can eat style. And you can go back again within that hour if you wish to pick up more food. And so if that's what's embedded in that question, we are honoring that all you can eat option by having you take out what all you care to eat.
Okay. If a student tests positive and they share a room, will they be moved into a single occupancy room?
Yeah, so we have worked in each case where we've had someone sharing a room is to discuss with who ought to or who wishes to move. And so we've had the case where somebody wished to move out, who maybe wasn't the person who was positive, and we've had just the reverse. And so we will work that through in the roommate pairing to see what makes the most sense about who wishes to move and how we get that person to be isolated from others as quickly as possible.
How will ASU support out-of-state students who are living off campus if they test positive for COVID?
Yep, and so we have managed situations like that previously. So if they need our help in finding a place to self-isolate, we will arrange that for them. And the same principles apply is if they're interested in some or not, in having us deliver some of that is where there is some type of sort of prepackaged food that is being delivered, and others will choose that they have friends or others who are dropping off food for them or they're having it delivered. And we'll tell them how to do that effectively without spreading the virus. And so we will assist for out-of-state students who are off campus if they need us to help them self-isolate and to manage their daily needs.
Okay. Is ASU giving options for students to opt for all remote learning for the fall semester?
And let me make sure I heard that. So are there options for students to do all remote learning in the fall?
Correct.
Yep. And so again, sort of reinforcing this notion that we want you to feel comfortable and confident in how you're taking coursework. So if you wish to be at home and interact in the ASU sync mode, which is our digital immersion type of format, then you can do that. We would love to know where you're at and to know as soon as you've made that decision, but that is quite possible.
And I know we will cover the logistics of, how to go to class in the fall if you're going to be attending remotely this Friday and are going to class this fall webinar. Time for that is to be determined, but you can check out our website, asu.edu/fall 2020 for additional details on that webinar. We also have other webinars that we have posted on that same page that focus on that very topic. So if someone's interested in learning a little bit more about that process, they can feel free to check one of those out. Moving on to another question about residence hall living. How are dorms being cleaned prior to move-in?
Yeah, so deep cleaning there, some fogging going on. So we have researched with our cleaning companies the types of chemicals or antivirals that are most effective in disinfecting and sanitizing in anticipation of students' arrival. And we've referred to that at times because it is similar cleaning supplies to hospitals or healthcare settings as hospital grade. So if you're seeing that disinfection terminology, because we want to know that students are heading into clean environments. I will emphasize that in addition to the cleanings that we will be doing regularly of high touch surfaces and the like through res halls, we strongly encourage students to do their own cleaning. And so I think this is a point we probably haven't made enough, is whether it's in the classroom, whether it's wherever you might be sitting down to eat, in your own rooms is, in addition to your own hygiene, cleanliness and cleaning in those spaces over time, in addition to the cleaning that we will be providing, is very important.
Will additional sanitation stations be available around campus?
We have been collecting, ordering, supplying. Katie's smiling. We talk a lot about how much sanitizing stations and how much equipment we have stockpiled in anticipation of your arrival. So do know that if for any reason you find one that's empty, please alert someone. We don't want that to be the case, but we have many sanitizing stations and different places where you can find product, hand sanitizer, and then of course, don't forget the good old fashioned washing your hands, heading into the bathroom, 20 seconds or longer. Can't beat that.
Sing the ASU fight song, right? I think that's about 20 seconds.
Yes.
Question about Sun Devil Fitness Center. What are our plans for this fall? Will it be open?
Yes, and so they are working diligently to do a few things that we think are really important in anticipation of arrival. And so we're spacing out equipment so that people can work out on machines that are socially distanced. We are also limiting at present some of the types of interactive activities that our students may do that might put them in too close of a proximity. So everything is spread out, including the pool. So as we open up the pool, it will be for laps and for workout there, not yet for recreation until we feel comfortable or confident that the local conditions would support having a more recreational feel there. But you will be able to make use of cardiovascular equipment, weight equipment, group fitness classes spread out, and the pool. So many of the things that you're accustomed to, we will be sanitizing them regularly before and after people hop on the equipment. And we also ask you to do the same, which I think many of you who work out know that that is only good gym etiquette.
Mm-hmm. And then talk a little bit about digital options for fitness programs. I know, in the spring, the Sun Devil Fitness Center offered a lot of workout classes and exercise opportunities online. So those will still be an option for students, right?
Absolutely. So one of the great, with all the sadness of a pandemic, one of the great enhancements and things that we have learned is how much people wanted to engage virtually for convenience. And so one of the ways that we learned that in Sun Devil Fitness and Wellness is the popularity of our on-demand list of classes that you can take asynchronously or on your own time. But we also have Instagram and other Facebook places that they're streaming their virtual courses. And so, taking a yoga class, taking Zumba, you can still do all those things. If you wish to be around no one and in the privacy of your room, you'll be able to use those services virtually.
Okay. Are face masks required during outdoor walking from class to class?
The answer to that is yes. And so if you look up our cities and our county restrictions currently, you're going to see that face coverings are required in public. And so we have adopted the same principle. In fact, we were out ahead of some of those pieces of information, just knowing how many students are on campus. It would be very difficult to have that adequate social distance if you're on a crosswalk or in a bike rack or the parking garage. And so, yes, if you are out walking from class to class, your face covering should be on.
Some of our students have heard that ASU will be giving students a kit with a mask, hand sanitizer, and other materials. How and when will students receive these kits?
Yeah, so the community of care kits will be arriving to us in mid-July. And so for residential students, we will be ensuring that you get them as you check into your residence hall rooms. For other students, we will set up a way for you to pick them up at the bookstore. And the community of care kit has a lot of helpful information in addition to 2 wonderfully spirited face coverings that remind you forks up, masks up. It also has a starter hand sanitizing, the liquid form, and then also some sanitizing wipes and a thermometer. So you can check your temperature daily.
And that answered the next question, which was, will ASU be providing thermometers, since we're asking the students to check their temperatures? And so I know the answer is yes.
Yeah.
One of our viewers asked a question about housing. Will we lose our housing if we decide to wait to move in until the spring semester? You talked a little bit about this earlier, but maybe just readdress this issue.
Yeah, so there is a good chance, I looked at the housing numbers this morning, that we may well need, we could need that room. And so if it is the case that that room is necessary, we would fill it. And then at the same time, depending upon how things look in the spring, same principle, we'd love to welcome that person on campus. And I can check and see. So if somebody wants to either email housing@asu.edu or email me directly, or you also see up on the slides the Dean of Students email, someone can provide more detailed information to that person in particular.
Next question is about whether or not intramural sports will take place this fall. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So we have been in touch with our contact with the county, the medical director there, and some others across the nation about whether or not intramurals will occur in the same time frame that they do ordinarily. With the current conditions here, I think that we would not be advancing with intramurals right away. Our hope is that it would be a delay in the intramural season. And so stay tuned, but all the guidance that we're getting currently is that, and you see all the challenges with student athletes and the like, getting testing and how that is affecting their ability to be in close proximity to play sport. If intramurals has something that is more able to be socially distanced, less contact, we may be facilitating some of those intramurals. We've had a conversation about probably things like cornhole might not spread too much. Those are your bean bags, these are mine. And so please know that we're looking at any way we can preserve things like intramurals, but also respecting that we want to stay as far away from being responsible for any virus transmission as possible.
Okay. Will there be increased shuttles on the schedule to assist with the need to social distance while commuting between campuses?
Yes. So in listening to the conversation from our campus shuttles and parking and transit, is we recognize that with spreading people out, that there will be increased demand. So we'll be watching ridership closely. And if it is needed to dot in with more shuttles, we will be paying attention to the need for that.
I just wanted to add, we're seeing a lot of questions about class schedules and when students will know about their individual classes. And I just wanted to add for our viewers today that we are planning for ASU sync options for classes to be marked in your My ASU class list in July. And just note that our next webinar on going to class will be next Friday, not this Friday due to the 4th of July holiday, but the following Friday, July 10th. And there we will be able to cover more details about class schedules and sync on July 10th. Another sports related question. Do we know yet how football games will work? Will there be games and will they be live streamed?
I wish I knew. We're staying in close touch with the Pac-12 and the NCAA about how we could, if we are able to watch our Sun Devils win, what that might look like in Sun Devil Stadium. And so, no word yet. We are again, which we are on many fronts, as you can tell, is closely monitoring our local conditions in addition to what's happening nationally. And then we will take the wisdom of all of those to come up with the best plan to ensure health and safety best we can.
What is the deadline date to notify ASU if a student decides to not move into the residence hall this fall?
Yeah, we would love to know as soon as possible. There are some cancellation fees attached to whether the decision is made in June or if the decision is made later in July. But we would be certainly willing to walk you through what the actual dates and deadlines would be. But the sooner the better to know if students won't be joining us.
School students, or should students come to school 14 days earlier to self-quarantine?
So I don't know that coming here to self-quarantine with the current conditions. I mean, there are some of our students who are coming with current travel restrictions if they're able to travel or have been traveling internationally. There are some requirements about that, and we can assist in the quarantine period needed. Our preference is that that is done, of course, prior to when you would get here. But we can assist with that. But currently, people coming from other parts of the country are no more likely to be quarantined than our families who might be joining students should check their home states about their quarantine requirements once they go back to those states. I'd actually probably be more concerned about that presently.
Okay. If a student doesn't move in for a fall semester, will they lose their deposit or will it be moved to the spring semester?
Yeah, so we can certainly go ahead and move that deposit to the spring semester.
Okay. Will face coverings be required in the gym?
Yes. So important to probably know that our athletes are also wearing face coverings in their workouts. They do make some face coverings that are more for sport and for military use. And so those have great breathability. It might be something that if you like to work out, you may want to pursue and do some research there, but you will need to wear your face covering in the gym.
When will move-in dates be communicated?
Yes, so we are planning to, as discussed in some previous webinars, is to send those out on July 6th. If there will be any delay in communication, we will let you know that on that or by that date. Our hope is to give you your dates and times on July 6th, so that gives us one more week to work out what is happening locally and the expectations at that time. But please know anything that's communicated then could be subject to change depending upon what is occurring locally.
If a student prefers a single bathroom, what is the best way to request a change?
Yeah, so we do have some rooms and we can see if we have any available still that are singles with access to a single bathroom. That could be more difficult to acquire the longer you wait to ask. So if you could be in touch with housing at asu.edu and see what is still available, that would be my recommendation to do that very quickly.
All right, switching to books and the bookstore. And Joanne, I'm not sure if you will have the answer to this, but can students still get their books in person at the bookstore, or will there be online ordering and pickup or delivery?
Without knowing for certain, so I'm making a gamble here, is my bet is it's going to be a combination approach. So if we go back to, which I fully anticipate, is that they'll be able to do, again, socially distanced coming to pick up books. So if your preference is to pick it up in person, that they will be accommodating in-person visits. If you wish to order online and then do a quick sort of pick up or drop off or however that works, I'll ensure that those who are in charge of the bookstore know that that is an ideal or a preferred option for some. But making sure I'm hearing that question correctly is my bet is it sounds like someone may wish not to have to go inside, but to be able to do a quick pickup and go.
Yeah, it looks like they're wondering what the options will be, which I think is a terrific question and one that we can add to our FAQ to make sure students have the most up-to-date information there.
For sure.
Another question about the schedule, student schedule. Are students allowed to go back home for Thanksgiving? And if so, should they return to campus?
Myself off of mute. So there is, I think, yes, of course, students may return home for Thanksgiving. We are still discussing, have not made a firm decision about whether or not students would need to return post Thanksgiving. The important thing to know, though, is that currently, as the academic schedule reads, is that finals week is that week after Thanksgiving. We do hope people will be smart and they will travel safely and they will travel responsibly. If they're going somewhere and coming back, and taking all the precautions we would want them to take to keep the community safe. But we are still considering the options for Thanksgiving, and just know that the current course catalog or course schedule has that week of finals after the week of Thanksgiving.
Will students living off campus have the same dining options as on-campus students?
I'm thinking that means, can you go to all the places and eat? And the answer is yes. Those will be open to you off campus, to come on as you would any other time and eat in our, it will be takeout only, as we mentioned, but eat in our dining facility. Yes.
Question about our health monitoring app, which I know is still in development, but one of our viewers is wondering whether or not the health monitoring app will have contact tracing features.
So the health monitoring app, you're right, it is still under development, and there's a possibility that some of that will exist with the app. The way that we are currently doing most of our contact tracing, which seems to be some of the more effective, is in this human to human interview type of way. And we do have the capability in our electronic medical records, which also has high privacy conditions, is to be able to do all of that through that medical records or that software platform. And so if we do add it into the ASU app or the other platforms that we are currently adopting and designing and building, we would certainly let you know how we're using that. And that would be more of an opt-in capability. But the contact tracing, that is more what probably people are familiar with, which is trying to figure out the people you've been in closest contact with in the 14 days prior to your diagnosis. That is done with people in an interview format, and then it is logged in our electronic medical records.
If a student is diagnosed with COVID, what medical attention would ASU provide in terms of supporting that student, since some parents might not be able to get to their students quickly?
Yeah, and so we have, thankfully, thus far, most of what students in the 20 to 40-year-old, and we know we have students who don't fit in that category, are experiencing are fairly mild symptoms. And so much of the treatment is consistent with some of the other health struggles they've had. Now, if things are more significant, a student ends up with moderate or severe symptoms or needs hospitalization, that will resemble the other ways that we have linked and referred students to getting care previously. And so can we make that recommendation? Can we facilitate? Will they know how to? Will our, if it's a student in residence, our community assistants and others know how to seek care and support? Yes, which is one of the reasons that we also have our engagers checking in, or we ask that students let them check in daily on them, is to see if they need advanced or greater medical care.
Once somebody has tested positive, for the people who have been in contact with them, will they be required to quarantine for 14 days? And if so, how do they attend class?
Yes, so if it is a close contact, we are asking them to quarantine for 14 days, as you noted, and they should be taking their class via ASU Sync. And so they should not be going in the classroom. They should not be going out on campus. There are very specific reasons that people should or could leave a quarantine situation, and those would be reviewed by the healthcare provider. But yes, if somebody is a close personal contact that has been identified through contact tracing, we will be asking them to quarantine for 14 days.
Okay, another question from our viewer. My son did not, from a viewer, I should say, my son did not tour the Tempe campus and was never able to see the campus or his dorm room. Is there a virtual tour or map that may be able to help him take a look at the environment so that he can feel comfortable with his move-in and navigating the dining areas and classrooms?
Yes, and so we have been streaming much of that information. We'll make sure, again, if you want to reach out via email, as we can connect you to a virtual tour of any of the spaces you're curious about.
Okay. Is it possible to move in halfway through the fall semester? And if it is possible, are students required to then only pay for the portion of the semester that they live on campus?
And that's similar to other years. So yes, if we have availability, we're very happy to welcome you onto campus. And then at that point in time, we will certainly be in touch with you about what is owed, or what would be the move-in fee, and then the amount of money you would owe to live with us.
Great. And just a note on the virtual tour question that we talked about momentarily ago. I know that all of our virtual tour and visit information can be found at visit.asu.edu. So there's just a quick website that folks can go to if they're interested in virtual tours. And of course, if you're not finding what you need on there, do go ahead and email deanofstudents@asu.edu, and we will definitely follow up with you. When will the community of care training be required and available?
Yep. So the part one of community care is released to you once you finish orientation. And so that initial community of care is something we have been doing for years, which talks about the expectations of living in our community, and principles that will support your success and the success of those around you. The enhanced community of care that we've added to address COVID specifically will be out in July. And so we're finalizing our video production on the community of care that relates to COVID. And so it will be a little bit about CDC guidelines, the expectations we have of you, and how you can take good care of each other. So it will be available likely in mid-July, but you'll get an email from me inviting you to go ahead and take it. And we're requiring both new and returning students to be familiar with the content before arrival.
Can students move in as early as August 5th and 6th as previously communicated?
Yeah, so our hope is to keep students on that move-in timeframe. And so that means somebody was paying attention in a previous webinar, that we do have some early arrivals beginning at the very beginning of August. And then we will be looking at moving in our local and some people who wish outside of Maricopa County, but within Arizona, to be able to move in that week that was mentioned, and then bringing in the remainder of our students in the week following. So our hope is to stay with that time frame. If there's any deviation or any changes from that, we'll be sure to let you know as quickly as possible.
Asymptomatic cases mean that students will not show symptoms like fever or chills. How will ASU encourage those cases to be caught before the spread of COVID-19 has occurred?
Yeah, so the asymptomatic transmission is the most difficult piece, which is one of the reasons we ask people to wear face coverings. If they don't know that they're transmitting the virus, it's hard for them to stay away or isolated from others. So it's exactly why things like face coverings are so important, and your other hygiene, hand washing, cough and sneeze covering. And so we know that we're limited in our ability to see that, and we're also, which is why we've offered testing to anybody that wishes to be tested. Is if there is any suspicion, you've come in contact, you need to be tested, as we would encourage you to be in touch with health services to arrange that with and for you, so that you can then not be somebody who is spreading the virus asymptomatically, unbeknownst to you and others.
How will parents and families be notified if their students become ill?
Yeah, so, the beauty of if your child is 18 or over, we are not required with personal health information to be in touch with parent and family members. But many of our students are fine if their parents and family members know, or they have given them access to some of the information that we have. So we always hope that's the student is in touch with a parent or family member and letting them know what is going on. If we were to need your help for any reason, or if somebody's health circumstance were to deteriorate to a point that we needed an emergency contact, we would of course reach out. But other than that, there are health and privacy laws that we must adhere to.
Okay. Another question from our audience, really on the academic side of the house, is can we email someone if our instructors do not post information on how they plan to set up their courses by a certain date? And I know the answer is yes. If you have not heard by later this summer, you should contact the provost office, which the email address for the provost is provost@asu.edu, or the dean of your college, and they can get the information that you need. Another question is there a plan for marching band? Do you have any intel on that?
So I think we have been in touch about band and cheer and some of the other things that are often connected to athletics. And so as we know more, we'll share. All of those plans are a bit variable and up in the air in the moment, similar to how we're planning with our athletes as well. So nothing at present, but we'll let you know as we have more.
Okay. I think this will be our last question. Can you just go over again how move-in will work again?
Sure. So we're hopeful that on July 6th, you will hear at least something from us about your window of move-in. We will be asking you to think about limiting the amount of people that you bring with you. One of the ways that might help you with that is we will be providing information about something called the UPS Home to Home program. And so that program actually lets you ship things ahead of time, which will be waiting for you and in your room once you get here. So it's a fairly convenient option for some families. We will be phasing in move-in, which you heard some early arrivals that we're planning to have come in the first week of August, then moving very quickly into those who are in Maricopa County or the surrounding counties in Arizona. They would bring in their items, but then they would leave. So don't bring anything that you would need over those next week or week and a half. And then we would be moving in our out-of-state and or international students to join us in that following wave. So this allows us to spread out individuals so that they're not bottlenecked, waiting on elevators, trying to socially distance. And so this is a different type of move-in. If you've moved in for families who've moved in another child or a person that they knew at ASU, this will look a little different because we need to minimize contact that people are having with others.
Okay, well, this is going to conclude our webinar for today. Thank you, Joanne, for providing all of the great answers that you did for as many questions as possible in the 60 minutes that we had. I know there are a couple of questions about whether or not this is being recorded and whether or not folks can watch it again. And the answer is yes, this webinar was recorded and it will be posted on asu.edu/fall 2020 in just a little bit. So check back this afternoon for the recording of this. And some folks have asked about how they can register for the July 10th webinar. You can register for that webinar at that same website, asu.edu/fall 2020. The time is to be determined on that specific date in terms of when that webinar will be, but you can register on that site. And again, as I mentioned, we've hosted a couple of webinars already on going to class this fall, and so you might want to check one of those out to get answers more quickly. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and we hope that you found this informative. If you have more questions, you can see there's some websites and email addresses on your screen right now. Again, I said this site a couple of times, but it's worth repeating. asu.edu/fall 2020 has a lot of detailed information about the fall 2020 semester available, including what classes will look like, things of that nature. If you have any questions about your courses or degree requirements or your class schedule, you can email provost@asu.edu. If you anticipate you're going to have technology needs for the upcoming semester to support your learning through ASU Sync or iCourses, you can email that same email address, provost@asu.edu. For any questions about student services or campus life, contact Dean of Students at asu.edu or call 480-965-6547. If you have questions about our cleaning protocols or any of our facilities or operational questions, you can contact bf-operations@asu.edu. And finally, if you are an admitted graduate student and you have questions about your program, you can contact gograd@asu.edu or visit graduate.asu.edu. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you this fall. Have a great afternoon. Take care.